What's going on, guys? This is my post-ride review of the 2025 Honda cbr1000rr. I gotta send a huge shout out to Hunter, Tommy, and the rest of the gang over at Stubbs Cycles for allowing me to throw a leg over this machine and bring it to you. In the description below, you'll find a link to the ride-along video. That way you can see this machine in action and you can get my reaction in real time to it. So let's dive into the cbr1000. First of all, fit and finish on this motorcycle is one of the first things that you'll notice. Would you expect anything less though? It's a Honda, and it carries its reputation solidly on this bike. The way that everything comes together, the way that wires are run, everything about this bike screams attention to detail. And that even moves into the riding experience. The cbr1000 is a very smooth motorcycle. In terms of the engine characteristics, going down the freeway, hardly any buzz whatsoever. The way that this motorcycle feels just in terms of riding, maneuvering, flickability, things of that nature, absolutely stone solid. The way that you would expect a Honda to be. Not overwhelming, not overly stimulating, but it is an amazing motorcycle in its own. And it is what you would expect if and when Honda makes a 1000cc motorcycle to act and ride like. So to talk about this motorcycle is very difficult in a vacuum, because in the extremely competitive class of leader class sport bikes, the cbr1000 has always kind of been a bit in last place. Not because it's not a good bike, but it's just not the leader class sport bike for those with a fragile ego. The thing is that Honda prefers to engineer in reliability, a solid riding experience, great performance, but performance that is going to be long-term and economical, at least in terms of maintenance and survivability. It's not as high-strung as the rest of the crowd, and as such, it simply doesn't make the outright horsepower that the other machines do. But where it makes up for that is a very lively chassis. And so what I want to do is I want to compare and contrast the CBR with a couple of my favorite sport bikes, the GSXR 750 and the GSXR 1000. Where does this motorcycle really fall in place? Well, it kind of occupies a really nice Goldilocks zone. So let's dive into the specs, and I think you'll start to pick up on what I'm putting down. So the cbr1000, it's roughly 432 pounds with all fluids. It's got a 4.3 gallon gas tank, and it's got a 32.8 inch seat height. But this is where it starts to get kind of cool. A 55.3 inch wheelbase. Now keep that number in mind when we compare it to the GSXR 750. 420 pounds, very similar in weight. 4.2 gallon gas tank, so there's really no difference in fuel capacity. But the GSXR 750 has a 54.7 inch wheelbase. In essence, it's give or take half an inch difference between the cbr1000 and GSXR 750. Now, compare that to the GSXR 1000. Well, that checks in at 55.9, let's call it 56, and that's a solid, basically an inch further out than the GSXR 750. And so when you start to compare the bikes, you notice that the CBR 1000 is certainly much closer to the 750. Give you another extreme example. The ZX10R, the Kawasaki, has a 57 inch wheelbase. It's practically stretched by comparison. So the illustration that I'm trying to draw out for you here is that the CBR 1000, it's kind of like you're riding a middleweight. I mean, it really is. If you start to compare this motorcycle to the likes of the R9 and some of these larger super middleweights, they all start to look very similar when you're talking about actual specifications. And that's what makes the CBR 1000 stand out to me. It doesn't have the outright power, but it's close. For 2025, the power has gone up to 189 horsepower, and it's 84 pound-feet of torque. By the way, that horsepower number of 189 is up 10 horsepower from last year. That's a big jump. So it still has good horsepower. It's got even better horsepower, and that gap has been closed, but it's still not a 200 horsepower fire-breathing monster. But considering the smaller chassis, the way that that motorcycle seems to carry the weight low, it rides a lot like my GSX-R 750, so much so that if you're to just take all the body work off of it, throw me the keys and have me ride them, it would be tough for me to tell the difference between the two with just how flickable and just how lively that cbr1000 is. So no, it doesn't have the outright horsepower, and no, it doesn't have some kind of huge, power hit or power rush anywhere, like, big torque hit or big power hit at the top end. It's got great predictable power, but it's got all of that power in the body of a middleweight. And that is what makes that bike so special and cool. So I absolutely fell in love with it. Now, what about like technology suite and everything else? Well, the bike that I rode, it had a TFT screen, multiple ride modes. The only thing it didn't have was the optional quick shifter. You can option it. It's about a $500 option. I would probably get it just to level the playing field. Most of the rest of the bikes come with that. But in terms of actual technology suite, it's got the wheelie control, the slide control, it's got all of that. In mode 1, which is the mode that I was riding the bike in, the nannies were pretty quick to step in, I will admit. Now, I wasn't really hammering on this motorcycle the way that I will with my own machines, but I gotta tell you, I was having fun with it. And mode 1 would let this bike play. And by the way, with that 84 pound-feet of torque, the bike really was a little wheelie happy, especially with that shorter wheelbase. Very endearing motorcycle. And even more so endearing with just how comfortable it was. Seating position was nice, foot position felt very comfortable and natural. Everything about the bike, fit, finish, and total rider fitment was absolutely awesome. So, loved the bike in that respect, had a lot of fun with the motorcycle without the quick shifter. And all things considered, it was a great throwback experience. A little fun fact on this, when I started riding leader class bikes, it was on Hondas, and I loved them because of the fit and finish and the way that they fit me personally. This bike absolutely just carried that trend forward. It's definitely a bike worth looking at. It can be, well, a little bit pricey depending on what your price point and what your pain tolerance is when it comes to pricing, but it's still right there in the mix. At around $17,500 with a quick shifter, it's pretty much falling right in line with where most of the other machines are. Maybe a little bit on the bottom, as some of these other bikes, and even within Honda's own lineup with the multiple R platforms, getting into the mid and upper $20,000, $17,000 these days seems like a practical bargain. But with a great suspension, it's got the show of big piston forks, work like a charm, everything's adjustable. I don't know what more you could ask for a bike. Again, fragile egos do not apply. If outright horsepower numbers are your thing, probably not the right bike for you. But if you love carving up canyons, you love getting out there having fun, you want a bike that's going to be lively, it's going to have the size and the mass of a middleweight, but the power of a leader bike, look no further than the cbr1000. Give Hunter a shout over at Stub Cycles. Tell him to throw you the keys to this thing. Take it for a ride. I think you might fall in love with this thing the way that I kind of did. So with that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. If you made it this far, consider hitting that subscribe button. It helps the channel out a ton. And with that, I'm going to check out. Hope to catch you on the next one. Take care.